Which one is better, the brand new, all-new HAVAL H7 that is coming to Australia very soon, or a very lovely vehicle, JETOUR T2, that we don't have in Australia? There is no confirmation for JETOURs coming our way, but I'm very much hoping that they will come to our shores, and I know that in a lot of other countries both of these models are available. So this translated car test and review is from a lovely channel called Battle of the Engines. It's a Russian channel. There is a host called Igor. He is going to put both of these vehicles through on-road and off-road, light off-road test and tell us what he thinks about it. One thing that I will call out is that he does mention that both engines are 2-liter turbo petrol engines. Nothing is said about hybrid, so we can assume that this HAVAL H7 that is in test is not exactly identical to the one coming to Australia. So Australian one is going to be probably a bit more powerful, a bit more expensive, and obviously hybrid with better fuel economy. With these disclaimers out of the way, I think it's still a very interesting test because geometry of the vehicles is still the same as everywhere else in the world, and capabilities as far as the clearance and other kind of things are also the same. Anyway, enough said. I was very interested to see this. That's why I decided to translate it for you. So please let me know if you enjoy this, give this video a quick like, and before we jump in, as always, we're very thankful to our sponsors Ottocast. So let's hear a little bit about what kind of products and offers do they have for you in the description with the discount codes. This video is sponsored by our old friends Ottocast, creators of a whole lineup of products that are enabling wireless connectivity to your infotainment systems in your car, as long as those infotainment systems have wired Android Auto or wired Apple Carplay respectively. Connect your phone via Bluetooth and then, without connecting any wires, have access to Google Maps, podcasts, phone calls, whatever else, you name it. We're users of their devices. We're not just resellers of something like that. And Ottocast, by the way, of course, sponsors the video by providing the devices, but they are not paying me to tell you only the good news. So thank you, Ottocast, for sponsoring this video. So what has been renewed in this JETOUR T2? Because this is not a very new model, is it? Especially for some markets where this vehicle is available. Well, this one comes with a standard automatic 8-speed transmission, not just a very polarizing DCT, especially as it's overheating very easily when being used off-road. So this was the weakest point of JETOUR T2, especially considering that otherwise it looks so brutal and off-road capable, kind of trying to be a Land Rover Defender out of China, right? But this is great news, okay? In Russia, HAVAL H7, this HAVAL H7, even in a non-hybrid version, as I understand it, is substantially cheaper than JETOUR T2 with automatic transmission. And while we're not focusing on the price differences in these translated reviews, because the Russian market is crazy in its own way, prices are inflated and all the other kind of stuff, I still mention it more kind of to give you a bit of an idea of how at least it's measured in the same market, because it's apples to apples comparison if you look just at their market. So both H7 and T2 are 2-liter turbo petrol engines, but JETOUR has more stated horsepower at about 260 horsepower. Fairly low placement of the engine as well in the engine bay, but the air filter is positioned quite high, which is suggesting that you could go over some level of water if you really wanted to. The engine bay is also quite well protected for T2. It comes with a steel sheet kind of underneath the engine, which will be mentioned a little bit later in this video as well. H7 has only 192 horsepower, at least this model, is a bit more of a modest engine all around, at least according to our reviewer Igor here. He also says that while on paper this is a lower power output, having DCT in this case actually helps somewhat on road, of course, as DCT performs much better than a classic automatic transmission as far as rotating momentum of the engine is concerned. And, but for the average Joe and Jane, I suppose when it comes to this measurement of engine power, we are really splitting hairs here. Let's move on. Clearance is measured here with a special device. Clearance of H7 obviously varies depending on which spot are you measuring space under. Is it under the bumper, the entry kind of underneath the car, or the actual lowest hanging point, which is under the engine bay typically? There it measures at about 190 millimeters, so 19 centimeters. Igor says that he, by the way, doesn't like these fake yellowish green insets here at the front that kind of look or are designed to look like these brutal towing hooks or whatever they are supposed to do there, but they are complete fake plastic things, and apparently he's annoyed about seeing them there. I kind of don't mind it. JETOUR T2 has that solid steel protector underneath the engine, which I suppose decreases the clearance, of course, but also gives you a bit of a confidence that your engine is not going to be hit by anything underneath. And even with that steel sheet, it has a more impressive 216 millimeters of honest clearance. Now on to the tests. The first test is the diagonal overhanging, as he refers to it, of the vehicle body across uneven terrain. It's when one of the tires, one of the wheels is hanging freely in the air. T2 goes first, and Igor comments on general how solid the body of the vehicle feels. It's heavy in a good way. It kind of hangs very solidly and very comfortably, very confidently. The doors open very easily. There is no creaking or sense that overall structure struggles under this unevenly applied pressure. One wheel, as we can see, is fully up in the air, and the full weight is supported by only 3 wheels. The frame of the boot feels very solid too. The large opening with the tailgate being swung open. He tries to apply pressure, as you can see, shakes the vehicle, kind of rocks it a little bit there. But the tailgate opens and closes without any issues, and so do the doors. He keeps measuring here, kind of spot checking the anti-rust zinc levels applied into the paint. I understand it's an extra layer applied to the vehicle. And he discovers that there is a zinc layer, so there is certain anti-rust protection. We are not going to focus on that, but it's good to know that he actually pays attention to these elements and that they are there. The same exercise is happening for HAVAL H7, and the first impression Igor straight away shares with us is that it feels smaller and sitting lower, like in a city car. It got stuck straight away with a lot of bleeps being audible in the original footage that you can't hear. Eventually he manages to achieve a similar-ish overhanging state, opens the doors, rocks the body of the vehicle, checks the wheel arches, wheel support arms, suspension. Anti-rust layers are present here too, apparently. He tried to open and close the tailgate, and here he could see some minor distortion/deformation that kind of creates that barely noticeable but still noticeable struggle. So basically not as solid a frame to demonstrate here. I think it's pretty obvious that H7 delivers less impressive performance in this test overall when compared to JETOUR T2. Test 2 is the ascent of a relatively steep hill. He starts climbing this steep hill. He starts with T2, enables off-road mode, rocks, some skidding of the tires we can see, and the grip of the tires isn't particularly firm by the look of what's shown to us here. He tries to climb the hill gently, but then kind of doesn't make it fully, not enough grip, and then the thresholds also become a natural boundary that the car clearance can't exceed to go over the hump, so it just sort of lands on its belly, so to speak. Yeah, so he stops his climb there. Good thing is that even stopping on a steep hill and then trying to start moving up again, he can do it. So the engine is obviously powerful enough to pull up. Same climb is attempted on HAVAL H7. No thresholds here, so potentially better for the clearance, but lower clearance to start with, and DCT plus a shorter wheelbase. As far as the entry criteria are concerned, he climbs. There is some skidding of the tires that we can see, and still doesn't make it all the way. We can clearly see that Igor gives up here rather quickly compared to what he did with JETOUR T2, for the same exact reason of not wanting to torture and overheat the sensitive DCT. I really can't blame him. Here is the next test, where he is climbing another now sandy hill with a bit of a sandy kind of pit that leads up to it. As we can see, T2 actually sinks pretty straight away and digs itself into the sand even on the approach of the hill. We're not even seeing much of a hill here. That happens when he is trying to go gently and going at a low speed. But then he obviously tries again with some acceleration, skips or kind of hops over that first sinking spot, sandy pit. And yeah, he can see a pretty confident result at the end of the day, so that's a good thing. What about HAVAL H7? Igor says that if he was buying this for himself with this kind of soft off-road scenario in mind, he would immediately order an aftermarket installation of that steel protection sheet for the engine underneath the engine, because the stock standard plastic dust protector would be clearly insufficient even for these very mild kind of adventures. You can easily see HAVAL H7 like this being taken, well, because it looks brutal, it looks off-road capable. You would try to at least go down to the beach with it, onto the sand or something. Well, I probably wouldn't. So he starts moving along the sandy surface and says that you feel that the clearance is lower than on JETOUR. He plays with the settings of diff lock a little bit on and off. First attempt of the climb is not very happy with it, tries the second time with quite a bit more of an acceleration and climbed okay. He says that it did require much higher acceleration than JETOUR T2 to make it. Now on to on-road acceleration test. Very quickly here, JETOUR T2 is able to accelerate from 0 to 60 kilometers an hour in 9 seconds as measured here. It's a little bit up the hill that it's measured, but nothing too steep. He comments that the steering wheel feels what he calls as empty. He calls it an empty steering wheel. He doesn't like it too much, unfortunately. HAVAL H7 is put through the same test and looks like it's able to accelerate within 9.2 seconds. He mostly continues commenting here on the jerkiness of DCT as it switches gears. You can hear it, you can feel it as you are accelerating, to be expected when compared to a normal automatic transmission. On-road driving comments continue here. HAVAL H7 is not very impressive on the outside compared to JETOUR. Of course, it's the eye of the beholder. We don't stop on that for too long, because what's the point? Everyone has their own opinion. But what's missing on the outside is arguably and apparently making up for itself on the inside with a lot of brutal design elements. It certainly tries to have this a bit of a, I would dare say, masculine feel to it. He comments on design of the digital information cluster, calling out very basic central dash without any clear or even expected now speedometer and odometer kind of projected gauges, I suppose. It reminds me of my HAVAL H6, as unfortunately Great Wall Motor looks like didn't improve on that version that I had in a 2022 model compared to this one that we're seeing in 2025, which is really unfortunate. There are some large physical keys, luckily here present to control some of the key functions, which is a good thing, of course. And then he proceeds to testing some voice commands. Apparently you need to say hello Great Wall for it to respond to you and to be able to follow your command, rather than something more logical like hello HAVAL, hello H7 or something like that. Maybe it can be tuned and customized, but we are not shown those functions at great detail. So any of these voice commands are still handled quite clunkily by the internal processors. This is not a particular exception that just this vehicle does it. I personally don't use them. Let me know if you do and if this function is actually very important to you. Yeah. Fuel economy is mentioned on H7. Let's remind ourselves that this is not a hybrid version until I'm told otherwise. I assume so. He says it's about between 8 and 9 liters per 100 kilometers, which I guess is okay. JETOUR T2 spends about 1 liter more, according to his measurements, and it is to be expected from a slightly larger, boxier and heavier vehicle. On the road, the JETOUR he's driving, and the first comment is that you sit much higher, have much larger windows with much better visibility in front and on the sides than in HAVAL H7. This does truly feel like a Land Rover Defender, like if you would allow us to compare these kind of very differently priced vehicles, while HAVAL H7 feels more like a city car compared to this T2. Igor says that, again, this steering wheel feels empty to him, and it also feels unnaturally squared off, like not squared off, but has these flat parts at the top and at the bottom, just out of fanciness. I don't know why they did it either. I agree with him here. Why not just make the steering wheel as a comfortable, nice on the hand circle? Igor comments then that on road overall T2 feels more serious and more pleasant, like a pleasant vehicle. Slightly louder road noise can be heard from the larger tires, obviously, but he feels very comfortable in this vehicle, especially on any road imperfections and bumps. Obviously, suspension is somehow tuned here better than on HAVAL H7. He comments on the black ceiling, which might be your thing or not. I kinda like it. The seats are heated, ventilated, and even the driver's seat has a massage function built into here in this JETOUR T2. Commenting on the overall sound insulation, both vehicles are apparently comparable in his view. Not particularly aerodynamic, neither of these vehicles. Maybe HAVAL H7 is slightly more aerodynamic, so you can't expect a particularly quiet or effortless performance at high speeds. Comfort of driving JETOUR is much better overall, he again repeats. Both vehicles support usage of 92 RON fuel, unleaded fuel, so in Australia we probably would be okay with 91, but Igor says that he would use 95. Well, wouldn't we all if it was more affordable? Interior space in H7, he sits at the back and he says a lot of space in H7, almost too much space. He says he measures it with his palm kind of above his head and in front of his knees and says, why would my kids need this much space? Well, Igor, my friend, some people drive not just their kids. Inside T2, there is actually a bit less space at the back, apparently. No sun protecting curtains are available on the side windows either, but overall it feels a little bit more fancy. However, the light color trim of the seats will make it harder to clean if something happens there. That is also being mentioned. It's more practicality question rather than optics question. Boot of H7 is measured at about 386 liters of volume if you load it up to the very roof, to the very top. I don't know how many of us do, but that's the measurement for you. Tailgate of H7 rises not very highly, not to a very high level, so if you're a tall individual, you might hit it with your head. JETOUR T2 doesn't have that problem because the tailgate obviously swings open to the side, but you will need to measure how you park, otherwise you won't be able to open it at all. It has a roughly 370 liters of boot space, but a larger organizer under the boot floor with larger kind of spaces there. But you would kind of say, listen, without splitting hairs, again, the both spaces here are somewhat comparable. T2 has some extra utility features though, such as a 12-volt socket and a full kind of electrical wall socket, which in Russia is 220 volt for Russia, but if wherever you are, it is going to be whatever it is that you have there. So as a summary, both cars are somewhat capable off-road and both definitely very suitable for on-road city driving. Which one is better? Well, depending on the budget and the preferences as always. HAVAL H7 looks like a bit more basic kind of thing, at least in this version, than T2, but has more space for the passengers and also is cheaper, in Russia anyway. T2 is a bit more expensive, arguably more interesting looking, and certainly a lot more expensive looking, more capable on the road, and steel engine protection, automatic transmission kind of add value to it. Me personally, I would go for JETOUR T2 out of these two vehicles if they were available in Australia right now. We are keen to see what HAVAL H7 hybrid version is going to be like. I will absolutely return to the format of the old videos where I bothered to go and test drive them myself, so I will actually offer you some of the videos soon, hopefully from the test drives of some models that are available in Australia. So please stay tuned as always, like the video if you haven't already, tell me in the comments down below which one of these two vehicles you prefer. Would you have liked if, let's say, Great Wall Motor rolled out both the hybrid H7 and the turbo petrol H7, presumably cheaper, in case you want to buy yourself one of those? I would really love to hear from you, my friends. Thank you for being with me today. Don't forget to check out sponsor offers in the description as always. Thank you, Ottocast, for sponsoring the video as always. And I'll talk to you next week about something else, value cars related in Australia and beyond. Goodbye for now.